seller closing costs in the state of Georgia. Let's talk about that. Hi, my name is Tonya Byrd. I'm with Keller Realty Atlanta Partners in Peachtree City, Georgia, and today we're talking all about seller closing cost. What you as a seller might have to pay for in the way of closing costs when you get ready to sell your home. Let's just start off with number one, the number one thing that all agents get asked about, and that is the commissions. Commissions usually run between 5 to 7%, with the average being around 6%, and they are negotiable. I would caution you on going with a discount broker. They have that saying, you get what you pay for. So really interview your agent and see where some of those commission costs, what are they going to cover? What's the marketing plan? Or is it going to cover staging, professional photography? Are they going to run social media ads? Will you have a landing page? And ask them about their experience as well. And keep in mind that normally the commission, when the listing agent, they don't take the whole 6%, they will split it with a buyer's agent, and so they get a portion of it, and then the buyer's agent gets a portion of it as well. Number two, liens. Now, of course, when the closing attorney gets a title company to do a title search, they will find the most common lien that's on a property, which is a mortgage. So if you have a mortgage, they'll find that, and whatever's left to be paid off on that principal will be paid off and come out of the overall proceeds. There's some other liens that can be found on your title, and that's if you happen to fail to pay some people. So if you had maybe a contractor come over and do some work and you didn't pay them, they can put a mechanical lien on your property. You could also get a judgment or a code violation or a utility bill lien put on your property. And during that title search, if they find any of those things, they will get those things cleared up so that the title will be cleared and can be passed on to the buyer. And of course, those things would come out of your proceeds. Number three, there's some miscellaneous charges that you may be required to pay. That would be if you're going to have your money wired, your proceeds wired from the closing attorney to your bank account. There's usually a wire fee in there, and there's usually a wire fee for the payoff of your loans. There could be other little miscellaneous fees in there depending if you don't want to show up for closing and you have a power of attorney, or if you need to do a mail away. Those things kind of cost the closing attorney extra paperwork, and so they'll charge those extra little miscellaneous fees that you would be responsible for. Number four, prorated expenses. A prorated expenses, you have a portion of the buyer paying for this and a portion of the seller. And these expenses are typically your taxes and typically any HOA dues that you paid earlier in the year. And depending on what time of the year you close, depends on how much one party's given to another. So typically with HOA dues, they're due at the beginning of the year, and if you were to close in the middle of the year, then the seller's already paid the HOA charges, then the buyer's gonna give the portion from which they live to the end of the year back to the seller. Taxes are just the opposite. They're paid in arrears. So we're standing here in 2021, and taxes usually are not due for 2021 until the end of the year. And depending on if taxes are paid for the year or not, depends on whether or not the seller is giving money to the buyer so that they can pay the taxes later on in the year, or whether or not the buyer is giving money back to the seller because the seller has already paid for those taxes. So it really depends on the time of year, and the closing statement should tell you exactly what those expenses are going to be. Number five, title search and attorney's fees. These are usually a buyer's expense. They are usually a buyer's expense, and usually the sellers do not pay for these things unless there's closing costs negotiated into the contract. And if the seller has agreed to give a portion of money to the buyer to help that buyer in their closing costs, then it can cover some of those attorney fee charges. It can help cover any of the loan expenses that they may have. So again, that's another thing that's negotiable. If you're giving money over to help the buyer out because they don't have enough money or they ask for it in negotiations, then you could, as a seller, be paying for that through the seller contributions. Number 6, there are a few other little items that, as a seller, depending on whether or not it's negotiated in the contract, you might pay for them on behalf of the buyer. A home warranty is a good example. So if a buyer asks for the seller to pay for a home warranty on their behalf, if the buyer asks for the seller to pay for a septic inspection, or they ask them to pay for a pest control inspection, or the contract, requires them to do that, some of those things may come right out of your pocket before closing, or some of those things can be given to, the invoices can be given to the closing attorney, and that can come out of your proceeds, where those vendors get to pay at close. There's also repair items that could fall in place too. Sometimes people have yucky carpet and they need the carpet replaced, and they're giving the buyer a carpet allowance, and so that would be paid out from your proceeds to the carpet vendor. So there's all kinds of little vendors that you can work out deals with, so they get paid at close. The buyer gets something fixed or some kind of value out of it, whether it's a home warranty or a clean termite report or bond, and that comes right out of your proceeds. Number 7, last but not least, Georgia has a transfer tax. And if you get on the Google and you Google some things and you ask who pays for it, Google will tell you it's the seller. And in our contracts, it actually says it's the buyer who pays for the transfer tax. So how much is the transfer tax? Well, it is $1 per 1,000 and 10 cents per 100. And it's based off a sales price. So for example, if you were selling a house that was priced at $550,000, the transfer tax is $550. So that was a lot of different closing costs that you could be hit up with here and there. And that's where you need a good real estate agent, a good Georgia real estate agent like me, who can help you navigate through all the expenses you could potentially come up with that comes throughout closing a house up. There's other things that you may be required of that may not come out of your proceeds, such as making repairs. Really depends on how all that stuff is negotiated. So that's why you need to hire a good real estate agent. I'll be glad to help you out in the greater Atlanta area, and if you need somebody else out in the greater Georgia area beyond Atlanta, let me know. I'll be glad to make that hookup for you. And if you like this kind of content, be sure to subscribe, and I'll catch you all later. Bye. Are you digging the kind of content I'm producing? Then be sure to watch this next video. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. That way, you'll be in the know when I release my next video.